Out in the middle of the ocean, when we are very far beyond the view of any coastline, a cruise ship looks like a floating city. Thousands of people are sleeping, eating, laughing, and having their own activities under one roof. There are restaurants, theaters, pools, and parks. It feels safe, contained, and detached from the outside world. But hidden behind the polished floors and fun activities, a reality most passengers never know about. Every year, people die on cruise ships. And when it happens, something very different from what most people imagine quietly begins. Most cruise passengers are never told how common this really is. Cruise lines don't advertise it, and there are no public announcements when someone passes away. But statistically, when you have a ship carrying 4, 5, or even 7,000 people at a time, many of them older or with medical conditions, deaths are inevitable. Heart attacks, strokes, respiratory failure, accidents, and sudden illness happen at sea just as they do on land. The difference is that on the land, there are hospitals, ambulances, and authorities minutes away. On a ship in the middle of the ocean, there is only the ship itself and its own medical staff. When a passenger or crew member collapses, the ship's medical team is called immediately. Cruise ships have onboard doctors and nurses, and some ships are equipped with facilities similar to a small emergency room. They can treat many conditions, stabilize patients, and even perform some advanced procedures. But they are not full hospitals. If someone's heart stops or their brain's deprived of oxygen for too long, there is often nothing anyone can do. When the doctor confirms that the person has died, a precise chain of events begins, one that is practiced and carefully designed to be invisible to everyone else on board. The first thing that happens is that the cabin where the death occurred is secured. If the person passed away in their room, the door is quietly locked, and crew members make sure no one else enters the room. If it happened in a public area or the medical center, the body is moved as quickly and discreetly as possible. No one wants other passengers to see what happened. Cruise lines work hard to protect the atmosphere of relaxation and vacation. They do not want panic, sadness, or even awareness to spread across the ship. There are no announcements over the loudspeaker. There is no moment of silence. There is no flag lowered. For everyone else on board, dinner will still be served, shows will still go on, and the ship will continue to glide through the water as if nothing at all has happened. What many people do not know is that almost all modern cruise ships have something most passengers would never expect: a morgue. It is not marked on any public deck plan. It is not mentioned in brochures. It is usually located on a lower deck, far from guest areas, often near the medical facilities or crew-only sections. Inside are refrigerated chambers designed to hold human bodies at low temperatures, slowing the process of decomposition. On some ships, there are 2 spaces. On larger ships, there may be 4, 6, or even more. This is where the body is taken after death is confirmed, wrapped, labeled, and placed into cold storage. The person who just hours earlier was walking the decks or enjoying a meal is now stored quietly below, unseen and unknown to almost everyone on board. It sounds disturbing, but this system exists for a practical reason. Cruise ships may be days away from the nearest port. There is no one here to take the body. It must be preserved until authorities can take over on land. Sometimes more than one person dies on a single voyage. Cruise lines never talk about this publicly, but it does happen, especially on long cruises with older passengers. If the morgue reaches capacity, the ship must use alternative cold storage areas. These can include medical freezers, crew food storage areas that are temporarily cleared, or specially prepared refrigeration units. These areas are not meant for this purpose, but they are cold enough to slow decay and preserve the body until the ship docks. All of this is done quietly. No passengers are told that there are human remains stored below deck. The illusion of a carefree vacation is maintained at all costs. While this is happening, another private process begins for the family or traveling companions of the person who died. They are notified by ship officials, usually in a private room, away from public view. A senior officer, often accompanied by a medical professional, explains what happened and confirms the death. For many families, this is a moment of shock and disbelief. They boarded the ship expecting relaxation, not tragedy. Cruise lines have protocols for this situation. The family is usually moved to a private cabin, away from their original room, especially if that room is where the death occurred. They are offered support, sometimes in the form of counseling or assistance from trained staff. The company helps them contact embassies, consulates, or family members back home. They also begin handling paperwork, because when someone dies at sea, it becomes not only a personal loss, but a legal event. Every cruise ship is registered in a specific country, often called a flag state. This might be Panama, the Bahamas, Malta, or another nation. Even if the ship is sailing in international waters or visiting different ports, the law of that flag state applies on board. When a death occurs, the ship's doctor must officially record it, and the captain logs it in the ship's records. Depending on the circumstances, the authorities of the flag state and the next port of call are notified. If the death was natural and not suspicious, there is usually no criminal investigation. If there are signs of violence, injury, or unexplained causes, then it becomes more complicated. The cabin may be sealed, evidence preserved, and law enforcement from the next port will become involved. But in most cases, especially with elderly passengers or known medical conditions, the process remains quiet and administrative. When the ship finally reaches a port, the body is transferred to local authorities. This might involve port police, customs officials, and a funeral home. In some cases, the body is released to the family. In others, it is taken to a morgue on land for further examination or for preparation for transport back to the person's home country. This can be a complex and emotionally exhausting process, especially if the family is far from home. Sometimes, family members choose to leave the cruise at that port and return home. Sometimes they stay on board, unable or unwilling to leave immediately. The cruise line may offer compensation, refunds, or assistance, but the emotional weight of the loss often makes the rest of the journey feel meaningless. Meanwhile, for the rest of the ship, almost nothing changes. The cabin where the person died is thoroughly cleaned. Sometimes it is sanitized and prepared to be used again within days or even hours. New passengers might sleep in the same bed, unaware of what happened there. The ship continues its route. Music plays, meals served. Pools are filled with laughter. There is something deeply strange about this. A human life ends, and within a floating city, it barely makes a ripple. Crew members, however, are very aware of these events. For them, it is part of the job. They are trained in how to handle deaths, how to move bodies discreetly, and how to avoid alarming passengers. For some crew members, especially those who have worked at sea for many years, death becomes a quiet, somber routine. It's not rare, but it's familiar enough that everyone knows the drill. There have been cases where cruise ships had to divert to the nearest port because of a death. This usually happens if the body cannot be safely stored, or if the death involves a serious medical or legal issue. But most of the time, the ship continues its planned route. Changing course is expensive, disruptive, and affects thousands of other passengers. As long as the body can be preserved, the voyage goes on. Some people are surprised to learn that cruise ships even have morgues at all. The truth is that they must. International maritime regulations require ships carrying large numbers of passengers to be prepared for deaths at sea. This includes proper storage, documentation, and procedures for handling remains. It is not something cruise companies advertise, but it is something they plan for carefully. There is also a psychological aspect to all of this. Cruise lines are in the business of selling happiness, escape, fun, and fantasy. They do not want passengers thinking about mortality while sipping cocktails by the pool. So everything about death on board is designed to be invisible. The goal is not disrespect. It is control. Control of the atmosphere, the narrative, and the experience of everyone else on board. Yet for the families who experienced it, the memory is unforgettable. Being on a ship, far from home, surrounded by strangers who are celebrating while you are grieving, creates a surreal and painful contrast. The ocean outside your window looks the same as it did before, but your entire world has changed. Some families later speak about feeling trapped, unable to escape their grief while the ship keeps moving. Others are grateful for the support they receive from the crew. Experiences vary widely, but almost all agree on one thing. It is not something you ever expect when you book a cruise. In rare, 'cause deaths at sea become public. News outlets report them, especially if they involve suspicious circumstances or unusual events. But the majority never make headlines. They remain private, quietly recorded in ship logs and government databases, known only to the people directly involved. There is something haunting about the idea that while you are watching a show in a theater at sea, a human body might be resting in cold storage just a few decks below you. Not in a horror movie way, but in a deeply human way. It is a reminder that even in the most carefully controlled environments, life and death do not stop. Cruise ships are designed to be self-contained worlds. They generate their own power, make their own water, treat their own waste, and handle their own emergencies. In that sense, they are like small cities drifting across the ocean. And just like any city, people are born, people get sick, and people die. The difference is that at sea, there is nowhere to escape that reality. It must be managed, stored, documented, and eventually handed back to the world on land. So, the next time you see a massive cruise ship sailing past the horizon, full of lights, and music, and laughter, remember that it carries more than just vacationers. It carries human stories in every form, including the ones that end quietly. Far from shore, far from his homeland, beneath the surface of a perfect holiday, have a safe travel